Welcome back to this journey through the countryside of the south of England. I've just left Bath, heading towards London, and I came across a sign to a village named Box. I thought this was an interesting name for a village, so I decided to make a quick stop. As I was driving in, I had to go over an interesting-looking bridge, so I wanted to go and check it out.
The Box Tunnel is a subterranean marvel hewn through the limestone under the aegis of the illustrious engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Completed in the year 1841, this remarkable feat of Victorian ingenuity also harbours an enigmatic legend. With its precise alignment and exacting construction, the tunnel is a conduit of not merely trains, but also celestial luminosity. The tunnel is so meticulously oriented that, on Brunel's birthday, April 9th, the rising sun projects its radiance in an unbroken line through the aperture of the tunnel's considerable length.
As I was about to walk away, a train went through the tunnel, so I set up my camera to try and catch the next one. I ended up waiting for like 20 minutes. A woman stopped and asked me if a steam train was expected. I said, I have no idea, I'm just hoping for a normal train, and she said, oh, you're not a train spotter then. I laughed and said I wasn't. We spoke briefly about what I was doing in a random town filming a tunnel, and she informed me that Thomas the Tank Engine was created in a house nearby. There are ultimately only two states a human being can exist in: ignorance or understanding. Belief or knowledge. There are a million ways to exist in a state of ignorance, but there is just one way to exist in a state of understanding. All beliefs are ignorant. It does not matter whether your belief is rational and justified, because understanding does not come from belief. It only comes from knowledge. And it is possible to understand the nature of human experience, for to know is simply to have moved beyond the state of belief. When all beliefs are dissolved from your mind, then you will begin to see that knowledge is what remains. It was there before all your beliefs, and you covered it up. So again, there are only two states we can exist in. We can direct our attention towards ideas and theories which we agree or disagree with, and thus we build up and live within a mental image of the world. Or we can not do this. We can reject all mental images and see the world as it is without the interference of labels. The next village I pass through is called Laycock. I'm aware that there is an abbey in this village that is of particular importance to fans of a certain franchise of modest popularity. I walked to the entrance of the abbey, but they were charging like £17 or something for entry. Nevertheless, I found a path that led around the back of the abbey, filled with sheep. I noticed that the back door was open, and for a moment I considered hopping the fence to film inside quickly. 10 years ago, I probably would have, but I decided against it this time. Anyway, this is what the inside looks like. Do you recognise it? I next stopped in a town called Calne, and I noticed that there were several signs advertising great scientific discoveries that had been discovered in this town, including that of oxygen and photosynthesis. The claim is that Calne is the town of discovery. But I'll be honest, I wasn't much of a fan of the town itself. I did find this statue of a couple piglets, though, which I found a little interesting.
The unassuming town of Calne, in Wiltshire, hides a history that defies the town's modest exterior. Once a veritable epicentre of the wool trade, this town also achieved a distinction in the annals of gastronomic history. For it is here that the process of curing bacon a culinary development of profound and far-reaching import was discovered. Enter Dr. William Gilbert, an enterprising local from the 18th century, whose ingenuity illuminated the process by which ordinary pork could be transmogrified into that most celebrated of cured meats. The discovery that salt, when applied with precise methodology, could not only preserve but enhance the flavour of pork was a culinary revelation.
The next village I drove through was Avebury, and this is actually the site of the largest megalithic stone circle in the world. There's actually many stone circles here. They were scattered in fields in almost every direction. I decided not to stop, however, as there were loads of tourists, and I was planning to visit the more famous cousin, Stonehenge, at the end of my trip for the summer solstice. Anyway, they're just stones. When a person feels the peaceful state of no longer believing that their ideas can be discriminately true, a fundamental shift occurs. One begins to realize that the idea that we must believe and reason our way towards the truth, along with all the goals and intentions we have to this end, was simply foolishness. Trying always to experience more comfort, or trying to build a worldview that makes us feel like we have things figured out, is precisely what prevents us from seeing the beauty and sufficiency of experience in the absence of any attempt to limit and define it in any particular way. It is the folly of the pessimists, of the hedonists, and, critically, of the philosophers. But there is also danger in this realization. For if the state of non-belief overshadows the state of belief, then it may be seen as somehow better than belief, and as different from belief. Thus, the duality emerges, between ignorance and understanding, and if one devotes themselves to understanding, as opposed to ignorance, well now they are merely believing in disbelief, and they have fallen for the ultimate trap of life. I next arrived in a town called Malborough, and I was so tired at this point that I had to have a quick nap in a car park. I then went for a fairly long walk around the town, passing the very fancy public school Marlborough College, in the middle of which there was a rather mysterious and large hill. Actually, it was a barrow. I tried to get a shot of it, but there wasn't really a good angle. After this, I walked through the high street.
This quaint market town stands out for one singularly wide thoroughfare, its High Street, a broad expanse that stretches nearly as far as the imagination might wander. And in these bounds lies a legend of mythical proportions, a tale that has been spun into the town's very fabric. The legend posits that the broad High Street was the unintended creation of none other than a giant named Merlin. This Merlin, not to be conflated with the Arthurian sorcerer, was a colossus reputed to have roamed the ancient countryside with casual aplomb. In an episode of titanic oafishness, Merlin is said to have dropped a boulder of truly majestic proportions. The ensuing impact, so the legend assures us, was such that it gouged an avenue into the earth that would later evolve into the town's own high street. Legend has it that the town's name, Marlborough, has its etymological roots embedded in this peculiar fable, derived, as it were, from Merlin's barrow. Indeed, the term barrow refers to a burial mound, and so Merlin's barrow, which dates back 3,500 years, is apparently where our Merlin lies at rest.
I make it back to my car and head towards the market town of Newbury. Naturally, I headed straight to Wetherspoons to have dinner. I go for a short walk and then go back to my car. At this point, I'd started to feel a slight sensation of dread. I contemplate whether I'm wasting my time by doing this trip. and I have doubts about ever achieving my goals in life. It took me a while to find an appropriate place to sleep, but eventually I did. I really must have been exhausted the previous day, because I slept for 10 hours. But I was feeling rejuvenated now, and the dread and doubt from the previous day slowly subside as I walk around this nearby reservoir. After walking around the reservoir, I head off towards Reading. I reach Reading and walk into the town. There was a really nice smell in the air, like a mixture of Middle Eastern cuisine and perfume. Naturally, it was time for a couple Greggs sausage rolls, followed by Wetherspoons again, as I needed to free up some storage space on my phone. I had a quest to complete now, to find a particular building that, like the Glastonbury Thorn from the first episode, may or may not actually exist.
Among the many compelling tales one could tell about Reading, there is one chapter that concerns the town's historical association with none other than the venerable biscuit. Huntley and Palmer's, established in the year 1822, burgeoned into one of the largest biscuit manufacturers the world has ever seen. So pervasive was its influence that it earned Reading the affectionate nickname of Biscuit Town. Reading's football team were also known as the Biscuit Men, and the company provided free biscuits for all first-class rail travellers coming home from London. The company was responsible for transforming what was once a humble homespun treat into a globally recognised commercial product. By the early 20th century, Huntley and Palmer's had become the Coca-Cola of the United Kingdom, their biscuits being sold in 172 countries around the world.
I found this apartment building that is clearly related to Huntley and Palmer's, but I don't think this is one of the original buildings, if there are any left. I eventually found this building here, and I do believe that this is the only remaining building of the famed Biscuit Company. I'm now driving into Slough, which was a somewhat painful experience. Here, someone almost drove into me because he was looking at his phone.
Slough is a locale that has garnered the attention of poets, television producers, and critics alike, a veritable case study in the socio-cultural metamorphosis of post-industrial Britain. The town's most prominent literary accolade, if one may call it such, comes from the notable poet John Betjeman, whose poem Slough commences with the evocative imperative, "Come, friendly bombs, and fall on Slough. It isn't fit for humans now." Beyond this, Slough has earned the indelible place in contemporary media through its role as the setting for the original UK version of the television series The Office.
At this point, I haven't showered in a few days, so I found a gym where I could reset. I had to somewhat blag my way in because I don't think this particular gym was technically covered on my membership, but the receptionist didn't give me much hassle about it.
I just checked when I was outside, it's exactly the same as this one, so it should be included.
You may not recognise this unassuming Premere Inn building, but this is a site of considerable note to me. In fact, one of the reasons I was interested in stopping in Slough was because this was the location of a TV sitcom that I was very fond of growing up, Ricky Gervais's The Office, and this is where it was set. Only, of course, the original building was demolished about 10 years ago and replaced with this lovely structure here. After this, I go to Spoons to do a bit more work, and then I started driving towards London. I didn't get any footage of this because London has recently installed a low emissions zone extending into its outskirts, and since I'm driving an 18-year-old car, I can't go into it without paying a charge, which I didn't want to do. so I had to be careful to skirt around the edge of the zone. I had a pretty good night's sleep again, and the next morning I head towards London. I've actually parked in this location because I had the idea that I might see how far I can get in walking into or even through London in a completely straight line. I haven't put much thought into this, so I'm almost certainly going to fail. I just wanted to see how far I could get. And thus, I am heading to the start of what was once called Roman Watling Street, which, as the name suggests, was originally a Roman road. Actually, the road is much older than the Romans, and has been a trackway of some kind since very ancient times. But in London, the current road extends for 10 miles in an almost perfectly straight line, and I shall be walking all of it. The trap of believing in disbelief is a trap that I myself have been stuck in for many years, and I don't know whether this makes it better or worse, but I have been aware of this. I have been aware that what I have been doing in life does not lead towards peace. I just didn't care about peace. I was enraptured by what I have previously referred to as the feeling of righteousness, by the notion that while what one is focused on may not be beneficial for oneself, it is nevertheless beneficial for the world at large. And this feeling that one is doing something important and valuable for humankind is a much more powerful feeling than the feeling that one is doing something that is beneficial for oneself alone, than pleasure. Both righteousness and pleasure can make us feel good, but both of them conceal an insidious suffering. A focus on pleasure leads us to care most about ourselves, so we suffer morally, while a focus on righteousness leads us to care most about the world, and so we suffer physically. Both of these forms of suffering are largely unconscious. We become uninterested in, and detached from, morality or immorality in one case, and happiness or sadness in the other. We are ignorant that we are not living morally, or we are ignorant that we are not living happily. Because we cannot truly care about only ourselves or the world. It is merely that we have repressed one half of ourselves to the unconscious. And so, often when we think we have broken free from belief and are abiding in understanding, we have not. The feeling of righteousness is an attachment to the idea of enlightenment or liberation, and so long as we remain attached to this idea, we can only learn about it and cannot embody it. The key to achieving peace in one's life and genuine understanding of the nature of experience is to surrender your understanding of understanding and ignorance itself. To surrender the understanding I have described in this video. This is something I have not yet learned how to do. For the last day or so, I've had a slight pain in my left Achilles tendon, which was odd because I've never had that before, and it's not entirely uncommon for me to go on long walks. I've been able to ignore it so far, but today it was honestly so damn painful that I had to adopt a strange walking technique of rotating my foot outwards so that the tendon was in a more fixed position. I was really enjoying the walk though, and I promise I'm not just whining. It really was becoming agony, and I had about 14 miles to walk that day. What's going on here is that this kid tries to nutmeg me, which is when you pass a ball through someone's legs. Of course, I'm far too observant to fall for that trick, so I intercept the ball, roll it onto my foot, and attempt to do an around the world. Unfortunately, my football skills weren't quite up to scratch that day, so I didn't land it, and almost kicked the ball into the road.
Very skillful. Almost.
Something I was incredibly excited to show you on this journey was London's marble Triumphal Arch, and here it is. It looks a little more flat than I remember it. Here's something you probably didn't expect, if you're familiar with this channel. This is Park Lane, a very fancy street near Mayfair, and back before I had my first mystical experience that led to my rejection of all things material, I used to work on this street. Just to the left here used to be a famous nightclub called Whiskey Mist, where I worked as a table host, which was basically just a glorified promoter. It is strange to think how I went from total extrovert working here to the absolute extremes of introversion in less than a year. While I don't think I'll be returning to anything remotely like this anytime soon, it probably is time to return back to a slightly more balanced position. At this point, there really was no keeping on a straight line, because right in front of me is the wall to Buckingham Palace garden, and if I tried to find a way through there, I would most likely be shot. I didn't bother going past the palace, because I'm too cool, and it was getting late. I had to meet a friend. I get to Victoria and take the train to my friend's place. And that is where our journey ends for today.